historians out there that were not particularly happy with that, Dr. Lieberman being one. Now, he backtracked immediately and basically said, you know, what he was trying to talk about was that there are some people that may not be college ready that would be better served by technical training than actually going to college. But I think the number one thing that this points out is the debate that's going on in American society right now, which is, what is the purpose of a college education? Is it essentially for us to come here and learn the skills that we need and the skill sets that we need to get a job when we get out of college? Or is there a larger purpose of what we learn about our place in the world as well as those kind of job skills? And we are kind of at the crux of a re-imaging of what higher education means right now. We're stuck with over $1 trillion in student loans. We've got these free, massive online courses for free. We have, as some of our students have read in some of the books that we've read this semester, we see that in some cases there's no measurable educational outcome from people being in college for 4 years. And we're trying to re-image what we think about this college education. So tonight we are very fortunate to have a panel with us that's going to help us get through some of these issues. I'd like to just thank some people before we get started. Angie Corbo from Communications Studies and myself have been working pretty integrally with a number of different students over the last year or so. Professor Tim Sullivan from Higher Education has been gracious enough to come in and talk to our students about higher education history and the role of the federal government in higher education history. Professor Lloyd Baston has helped get us all together and helped get us funded. Liz Householder has been wonderful in organizing our trips to Harrisburg and Washington and various other things. And also Julie Dietrich, Marcina Picaron Davis as well have been very supportive, as well as our provost. And our dean is new, but I'm sure she will support us in the future. So we're going to have a kind of a somewhat formal debate style here. We have Professor Janine Utel from the English department, which is a humanities and a liberal art for those of you following at home. And she is going to take the side that the higher education liberal arts is not worth it. I don't think I have to say that she probably doesn't believe that, but that's the side she's going to take. And our provost, Professor Stephen Wilhite, is going to take the side that it is worth it. Now, in a perfect world, we would have asked him to do the other side, but I don't think he would have wanted to go on record, especially on a television show, to have done that. And we're lucky to have a respondent, Professor Sharon Marr, who is our new dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, will be responding after they talk. So basically what we're going to do is start out with about a 10 to 12 minute kind of overview from each of the panelists, and then we are going to have a brief 5-minute or so response. And then Dean Marr is going to say a couple of words, and then we're going to open it up for some questions from the audience. You do have index cards if along the way, if you're the type of person that's shy and doesn't want to get up and ask a question, you can write down a question, we'll be collecting them, and then we'll be asking them as well. So without further ado, Professor Utel.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes? Okay. When we're talking about the cost of a liberal arts education and whether it's worth it, what exactly do we mean? How do we define worth? Are we talking about a return on investment? Are we talking about something being worthwhile, an inherent good for both the individual and society? What specifically are our metrics for such a question? The question, is the cost of a liberal arts education worth it, as I'm sure you've noticed, has been showing up over and over again in public discourse. The front page of the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, the homepage of the Huffington Post and CNN, and even a recent documentary called Ivory Tower generated buzz during the last round of film festivals alongside the likes of Zach Braff and Richard Linklater. I'd like to begin by suggesting that there are at least 3 big pieces we need to consider when we try to answer this question. First, the money question, the cost itself in dollars relative to the average family's income, as well as things like rates of inflation, and the debt levels that Professor Leckrone was talking about. Also, the concern over return on investment. Is the money one spends on a college education and the debt one accrues going to result in a well-paying job? And do the liberal arts effectively prepare students for those well-paying jobs? Next, second, we need to look at the product itself. What do students and their families get for their money? Is the liberal arts education an outdated model? Has it outlived its usefulness? Is the liberal arts education delivering what it says it does? Third and finally, is the liberal arts education a public good, as in good for society, or is it something we should really be considering as a good, a product, or a service available for a price, whatever that price, to the private consumer? Are those dollars that taxpayers or the state or the government paying to subsidize liberal arts education at both public and private universities through direct funding, grants, etc., paying off for society as a whole? Should your liberal arts education and all it entails, intellectual fulfillment, knowledge in a variety of disciplines and from a range of perspectives, personal growth, the development of a wide repertoire of hard and soft skills, the equipment you need to be a free citizen, is all of this the responsibility of your fellow Americans? So what exactly is a liberal arts education? A liberal arts education is one grounded in disciplines and modes of inquiry which for centuries were believed to be necessary for the shaping of a free individual equipped to participate in civil society and live a meaningful life. These disciplines include the arts and sciences, and forgive me if I leave anyone out, literature, philosophy, math, history, psychology, sociology, anthropology, political science, and philosophy, as well as the sciences like biology, chemistry, physics, and astronomy. It excludes areas generally considered to be professional or technical training. Here at Widener, much of the work of a liberal arts education happens through the College of Arts and Sciences, and it does provide the foundation for our general education program. Along with the traditional disciplines of the liberal arts, when we talk about this version of a college education, we are often also talking about a traditional 4-year residential experience, where students between the ages of 18 and 22, give or take, live in an intellectual community with their peers, have close mentoring experiences with their professors, and participate in the benefits of student life activities. You'll notice in my opening definition that I said a liberal arts education prepares people to participate in civil society and live a meaningful life. I did not say anything about preparing people for well-paying jobs. Let's take a look at how much a liberal arts education costs. The average cost of tuition in 2014-2015, according to U.S. News & World Report, was $31,381. That doesn't include room and board, it doesn't take any financial aid or discounts into account, and there are certainly schools that charge more than that, some upwards of $40,000 or $50,000. According to Ivory Tower, which is airing this Thursday on CNN, for those of you who haven't seen it, the price of tuition has risen 1,128% since 1980, outpacing inflation and rises in cost of pretty much everything else available to the average consumer. State tuition has gone up 230% as funding has been slashed. How do we pay for this? I probably don't have to tell you. Loans. The average student graduates with a debt burden of about $25,000 according to the Project on Student Debt. This debt burden means that students are graduating in a position that makes it difficult for them to manage all the things that allow for independent adulthood: car payments, insurance, housing, starting a family, and all while possibly not being able to find a well-paying and secure job in the most difficult economic period this country has faced since the Great Depression. So, we're looking at laying out an exorbitant amount of money and taking on a great deal of debt for something that may or may not result in a well-paying job or any job at all. If you graduate with a liberal arts degree, what are your employment prospects? According to the National Association of Colleges and Employers, a group which does an annual survey of employers around the country in a variety of fields in order to discern salary information, in 2014, students who graduated with majors in engineering, not a liberal arts degree, found jobs with starting salaries of, on average, $62,891. Students who graduated with majors in business, not a liberal arts degree, found jobs with starting salaries of, on average, $57,229. Students who graduated with majors in the traditional liberal arts, humanities, science, and social science, found jobs with starting salaries between $38,000 and $44,000. How can we expect students to pay back their loans on $40,000 a year, and buy a car, and find a place to live, and start a family? When we consider the worth of a liberal arts education, the return on investment seems troubling. What if we consider the value of the product itself? Is there some intrinsic value beyond the worth of the tuition bill relative to future earnings? Go back to my opening definition. A liberal arts education is one grounded in disciplines which for centuries were believed to be necessary for the shaping of a free individual equipped to participate in civil society and live a meaningful life. Let me draw your attention to one phrase in there: for centuries. By centuries, I mean ancient Greece. I mean the Roman Empire. The most prestigious universities in Europe were founded in the Middle Ages. The oldest university, the University of Bologna in Italy, was founded almost 1,000 years ago in 1088. But we don't have to look that far back for the kinds of institutions upon which our own colleges and universities are modeled. Harvard was founded even before the United States achieved independence from Great Britain. Johns Hopkins, the model for the modern research university in this country, was founded in 1876. In between, you have a wide variety of small liberal arts colleges founded throughout the 19th century, many by philanthropists who believed in the value of a liberal arts education as a good for society. Larger state schools were started by the Morrill Act during the Civil War, which provided funding through what are known as land grants in order to build flagship state universities that would provide access to higher education for all. There's at least two problems with the system of higher education. One that emerged centuries ago that puts forth a liberal arts degree as an ideal and a worthwhile pursuit. One, it's stunningly inefficient. Let's take thousands of young people and remove them from the economy for 4 years so that they can pursue a wide-ranging, personalized education that fosters critical thinking and self-discovery. Let's spend thousands of dollars housing them and feeding them and providing them with expert faculty committed to cultivating their intellect and their spirit and their passions. Let's give them 4 years to figure out who they are in an environment designed to do pretty much nothing but that. That's 4 years when those thousands of students could be working, generating dollars for our economy and for themselves. $150,000 is a lot of money to spend just to find yourself. And at the end of it, what self have you found? A self who might be able to ask a lot of good, important questions about the world you live in, a self that has learned to question everything about the status quo, a self who has learned to think critically, a self who possesses both wide and deep knowledge about the best aspects of human endeavor, and a self who is crippled by an unfathomable amount of debt, flat broke. Under this model, the liberal arts degree seems like a dream cooked up by a bunch of elitists who have never had to worry about a paycheck. And if you are worried about a paycheck, then there's a second problem with a liberal arts degree, stemming from its emphasis on traditional disciplines. There doesn't seem to be a place for job training, for gaining facility with technology, for preparing for a specific career. And this brings me to my final point, emerging from these two problems. The model of the liberal arts education made a claim for itself for centuries that it is a public good, that it prepares students for participation in civil society. All of those philanthropists in the 19th century, Matthew Vassar with the money made from being a brewer, Andrew Carnegie with his steel millions, believed that educating students in the liberal arts would be good for both the country and the economy, as well as for the individual and the community. All of those land-grant institutions, now some of the most infamous party schools in the country, were founded in the belief that access to education was important for everyone, not just elites. However, given the exigencies of our national economy, the need to pursue innovation in science and technology in order to remain globally competitive, and the necessity of skilled and well-trained workers, it would appear that the public good does not demand the individualized cultivation of young minds through the liberal arts. That may be a private consumer service that you can purchase through the means available to you should you desire it and if you can afford it. The public good demands that our taxpayer dollars and our state budgets be directed towards other things that will sustain our national economic health into the 21st century. And as we look ahead into the 21st century, it may be becoming increasingly clear that the liberal arts education is not the model to move us forward. It just might not be worth it any longer. Thanks.
Professor Utel. And now we will have the pro side from Provost Woolhedge.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Is the cost of a liberal arts education worth it? I have, of course, committed to arguing in the affirmative. When I did so weeks ago, I was acting out of a sense of duty. How could the chief academic officer of the university decline the offer to defend the value of a liberal arts education? Then, as I began last week to think in earnest about this debate and the intellectual prowess of my opponent, I began to worry, recognizing that this debate is a high-stakes event. For if I fail to win this debate, then the university president and many members of the faculty may feel that the only honorable thing for me to do is resign. Although there are probably some faculty members who don't need the results of this debate to conclude that I should look for another job. However, I've been comforted by the thought that should Dr. Utel, as chairperson of the English department, win this debate, she would have a lot of explaining to do to her faculty colleagues and students. So despite her persuasive opening presentation, I am hopeful that she will go easy on me. I would like to propose 3 reasons why a liberal arts education is worth a significant cost. Reason number 1, a good liberal arts education equips an individual with the knowledge and skills needed for successfully navigating the challenges and opportunities that will arise throughout adulthood. The Association of American Colleges and Universities, AAC&U, argues that a liberal arts education should guide students to acquire knowledge of human cultures and the physical and natural world. The student should also acquire intellectual and practical skills, including inquiry and analysis, creative and critical thinking, written and oral communication, quantitative literacy, information literacy, teamwork, and problem solving. Finally, the student should develop personal and social responsibility, including civic knowledge and engagement, both local and global, intercultural knowledge and competence, ethical reasoning and action, and foundations and skills for lifelong learning, a tall order for a 4-year undergraduate experience. But the extent to which a college or university delivers a curriculum and learning experiences that conform to these recommendations is one metric prospective students and their families can use in selecting a college. But why is having such a broad range of skills and knowledge important? It is important because there is considerable fluidity in the job market in the US. A 2012 study by the Bureau of Labor Statistics found for a cohort of individuals born between 1957 and 1964 that they had on average 11.3 different jobs from the time they were 18 years of age through age 55. And many economists and labor experts would argue that job fluidity for current 18-year-olds is likely to be significantly greater than that of the individuals included in this study. A good liberal arts education provides individuals with foundational skills and knowledge for lifelong learning that will be required in adapting to changing employment prospects. Furthermore, adulthood brings with it a myriad of developmental challenges. Entering into long-term romantic and sexual relationships, functioning effectively as a parent, caring for aging parents, dealing with one's own physical and possibly mental decline, to name just a few. The foundation for lifelong learning afforded by a liberal arts education is just as important for successfully navigating these developmental challenges as it is for successfully navigating the changing world of work. Reason number 2 for pursuing a liberal arts education. A liberal arts education encourages the development of knowledge and skills that are sought by employers. In 2013, AAC&U commissioned a major study to assess the perceptions of leaders of businesses and nonprofit organizations with regard to priorities for college learning. Here are the learning outcomes that these potential employers most strongly endorsed. Problem solving in diverse settings, ethical issues and public debates important in their field, direct experience with community problem solving, critical thinking and analytical reasoning, civic knowledge, skills, and judgment essential for contributing to the community and to our democratic society, complex problem solving, broad knowledge in the liberal arts and sciences, and written and oral communication. Furthermore, 93% of those surveyed indicated that a demonstrated capacity to think critically, communicate clearly, and solve complex problems is more important than a candidate's undergraduate major. Virtually all of these most highly endorsed learning outcomes for college graduates should be part of the expected learning outcomes for graduates with a liberal arts education. These findings are complemented by a major AAC&U report by Deborah Humphreys and Patrick Kelly that was released this year. This report documents evidence from other research showing that, quote, the average earnings of a bachelor's degree holder remain nearly twice as much as those of a worker with only a high school diploma. And furthermore, that the recession hit those with less schooling disproportionately hard. Nearly 4 out of 5 jobs lost were held by those with no formal education beyond high school. Reason number 3 for pursuing a liberal arts education, and the most important one. A liberal arts education will increase your likelihood of being happy. Long-term research from the University of Chicago's General Social Survey that began in 1972 shows that within all demographic groups, there are variations in reported happiness. So, what factors account for these differences? Genetics research from the University of Minnesota and elsewhere suggests that roughly 48% of the variation is genetic. Some of us are simply predisposed to be happier than others. Roughly another 40% of reported happiness is associated with one-off events, such as landing the long-coveted promotion, but these events have a remarkably short-lived effect on happiness. The remaining 12% of the variation in happiness appears to be importantly related to 4 factors over which we have more control. Faith, or the inclination to explore the bigger questions of life, not necessarily dogmatic religiosity. Family, social connections, and work. I would argue that a liberal arts education prepares a person to derive maximum happiness benefits from all 4 factors. What better context to develop habits of mind focused on explorations of spirituality than the discussion of Hamlet in an English literature class? Maintaining positive and supporting relationships in the family and in one's larger social network can benefit from effective oral and written communication skills, creative thinking, and teamwork and collaborative problem solving, all of which are desired outcomes of a liberal arts education. With regard to work, one might be tempted to believe that work contributes to happiness to the extent that it brings increased income to the worker. It is true that increased income contributes to increased happiness in those who are impoverished, as it alleviates the stress associated with the basics of life, such as food, shelter, and medical care. However, as cognitive psychologist and winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics, Daniel Kahneman has demonstrated, increases in income, even large ones, beyond 125% of the average middle class income, has little impact on reported happiness. Arthur Brooks, president of the American Enterprise Institute, notes in his New York Times column, Franklin D. Roosevelt had it right. Happiness lies not in the mere possession of money. It lies in the joy of achievement, in the thrill of creative effort. I contend that the likelihood of experiencing the joy of achievement through work is heightened by a liberal arts education that provides the individual with the knowledge and skills for successful adaptation to the changing opportunities for meaningful work. So, if you want to be happy, be an English major. However, the cost of a liberal arts education does have to be a large consideration for prospective students and their families. I would never encourage a prospective student to pursue a degree that would leave the individual with such indebtedness that she could not realistically expect to meet the college loan payments and other costs of daily living on the likely income she will earn upon graduation, especially if that individual has a high school record that suggests she will struggle with the rigors of a college curriculum, or if she appears only marginally motivated to succeed in college. I applaud the government's efforts to encourage colleges and universities to give families more information about the post-graduation implications of taking on significant amounts of college loan debt. I agree that colleges and universities must strive to contain cost, but I also point out that a very large percentage of the budget at most colleges and universities is devoted to personnel cost. Higher education is a people-intensive enterprise, and increased reliance on online courses will not significantly reduce the cost of higher education if we still want to ensure that graduates exhibit all of those desired learning outcomes of a liberal arts education. So while colleges must do their part to limit the rate of increase in cost, we as a society need to face the fact that we have to provide more non-loan-based financial aid as well as more low-interest loans to working class and lower middle class families to support their children going to college. Yes, and I can safely say this even though the cameras are rolling, because I will never be a candidate for a major political office. We must increase taxes on families earning more than $200,000 a year to fund increased grants and low interest loans to those who want a liberal arts education but lack the family resources to pay for it. With the unrelenting shift of the U.S. economy away from jobs that do not require a college education to those that do, increased investment in higher education is a national imperative. We know what we have to do to pay for that investment. Let's muster the courage to do it. Thank you.
Now we'll go back to Professor Utel. You get a short response or rebuttal, and then we'll allow Provost Woolite to rebut your rebuttal.
Okay, thank you. Well, those are some very compelling arguments for the value of liberal arts education. I think for my rebuttal, I would mostly posit a couple of questions. First of all, beginning with your initial points, and I would say the final point about happiness. I would say that you were describing the kinds of knowledge and the kinds of skills, the ways that a liberal arts education prepares young people to meet the challenges of adulthood. And I would ask whether or not we could say for certain that a liberal arts education, a liberal arts degree, is the way to do that. Would you be suggesting that people who don't have a liberal arts degree are somehow ill-equipped to meet the challenges of adulthood? And a number of studies have shown that partly because of the debt load that young people carry, partly because of the tenuousness of their economic situation coming out of college, where they may have been spending all of that time getting their liberal arts degree that is supposedly preparing them for adulthood. Ultimately, they emerge less prepared for adulthood in the ways that we traditionally think about being prepared for adulthood, namely things like, some possible hope for financial security, for example, being able to start on the path towards the traditional milestones and markers of adulthood. And I'm not sure that, I can just say this because this is the role that I'm playing right now. I'm not sure I'm entirely convinced that a liberal arts education is the thing that provides people with the sort of equipment for psychological development, maybe cognitive development, but the moving forward on the life path that you suggest. And I would say that for happiness too, possibly. How do we know that a liberal arts education is the thing that somehow alters a person's existential state towards the direction of happiness? I would also suggest that happiness is overrated. No, I'm
It's only 12%.
I don't have that genetic makeup, I guess. I don't know. And then the other thing I would say too is that we are talking about a liberal arts degree and a liberal arts education, not a college education overall. So for example, when you talk about how employers, for instance, desire these particular learning outcomes, they also see a lot of college students come out of college not having met those outcomes, not having achieved those kinds of skills and those kinds of dispositions that they want to see. So employers say over and over again, we want students who can read, we want students who can write, we want people who can think critically. We are not seeing this happening in college graduates. So what's happening there? And the point about how the average earnings of a college-educated person are much higher. I believe, according to Ivory Tower, the number is something like possibly $1 million over the lifetime of a college degree holder, as opposed to a non-college degree holder. That's a big number that doesn't necessarily take into account the difference between somebody who's graduating from college with a degree in business, or a degree in engineering, or a degree in some other sort of specific career path oriented kind of degree. So we're not necessarily talking about liberal arts majors there, or liberal arts graduates. We're talking about people possibly in other fields. And so the numbers that you were giving don't necessarily, at least in that area, don't break down specifically by liberal arts degree holders. We can talk about the value of a college education, but when we sort of focus specifically on the liberal arts, the conversation might be different.
Okay. You gave me a lot of questions to answer in a short period of time. Those are all great questions. And I would start by saying the answer to a number of them has to do with an area of endeavor at colleges and universities that you've been very involved in here at Widener, and that is outcomes assessment. That colleges and universities do need to be held accountable for the kind of learning outcomes that students are exiting the university with. So when I laid out before all of those desired learning outcomes of a liberal arts education, those are the desired outcomes. And so it's quite right to ask, are colleges and universities delivering on that? And increasingly, the government and many others, quite rightly in society, are asking, can you demonstrate that indeed you are delivering on those outcomes? I think increasingly colleges are beginning to measure what those outcomes are. They're beginning to identify where there are deficiencies and gaps between what the ideal outcome is and what the reality is for their actual graduates, and in turn are making adjustments in their instructional programming, in the learning experiences that students are having, in order to come closer to what those desired outcomes are. And I think it would relate even to issues such as happiness. I can't point to any specific study that looks specifically in relation to desired liberal arts outcomes and a specific measure of happiness. But I have to say that to the degree that a program is delivering on those skills and knowledge that is the desired outcome for a liberal arts education, I would have considerable confidence that that would be a major predictor of happiness, well-being, and successful navigation of the challenges of adulthood. You are quite right to point out that income differential between college graduates and liberal arts graduates lumps together all college graduates, including those who are pursuing professional degrees. But in fact, we have published just this year another study that was sponsored by AAC&U that I mentioned earlier with regard to those overall differences that look very specifically at liberal arts majors in relation to majors in other disciplines. And it followed individuals over a lifetime, not a specific cohort of individuals, but by doing cross-sectional comparisons across different age groups. What that study found was that immediately after graduation, there was an income differential between those in the liberal arts and in professional programs. But that study also found that if you go out to age 51 to 60 and look at those who majored in liberal arts versus those who majored in a variety of professional fields, teaching, for example, a number of business disciplines, social work, teaching, that gap had considerably narrowed, and that in fact those with a liberal arts degree were slightly earning higher salaries than those in some of those professional areas. It doesn't hold across all. Engineering was still higher across the age span that was looked at. The same for unemployment. Right after graduation, higher unemployment in those who majored in the liberal arts and sciences. But again, looking further out in the lifespan, the gap had narrowed very considerably between a number of those professional fields and liberal arts and science. And a big part of that was the factor of graduate education beyond an undergraduate liberal arts education. Some of that change, that narrowing of the gap, is based upon the degree to which those who pursued liberal arts and science then go on to do further study. Now, you could argue, oh, just more debt in order to do graduate study. But I see that as an indication that individuals come out prepared to adapt to the changing realities of their life and of the workplace and pursue that additional study that enables them to successfully navigate what those opportunities are. And I would finally say that the issue of loan debt is undoubtedly a major issue. And it is not one that is going to be resolved in a very short period of time. And that information and education for prospective students and families about the implications of loans that are being taken out is incredibly important. But I also believe very, very strongly we cannot cede the ground to those who are attacking higher education and the cost of higher education without pursuing your issue of the common good. Because I believe that this education does contribute to the common good, and that we as a society therefore have collective responsibility to help make this kind of education broadly available to individuals throughout the society pulled from various income strata. It should not be only those in the upper 5% of income in this country who can afford the kind of rich learning experience and environment that a liberal arts education provides to students.
Thank you both. So let's give a round of applause to our speakers. So we would like to thank Professor Utel for her arguments against the liberal arts education and Provost Wilhite for sharing his information with us, arguments for a liberal arts education, and provided students with the opportunity to really see how to construct an argument and even to construct
construct an argument when you don't necessarily agree with the issue. So it's a great intellectual debate, and we really appreciate that, and we appreciate what you've modeled for our students. So at this point, we're going to transition, and we have a session respondent. So Dean Sharon Marr, who is the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, will share her thoughts, observations, and she'll do some synthesis for us this evening, so we'll be able to think about this. But students and faculty members who are here this evening, we have index cards that we distributed before the program started tonight. Please take the opportunity to write down some questions you may have, and at this time I'll ask for the IMC campaign students if you would just work the aisles and collect the cards. So Brittany's over there, Zach's over there, Stacy and Steve will work on this side. Hand your cards off and we'll look at your questions. So at this time, I'll turn this over to Dean Marr.
Okay, well, thank you very much. One of the things I think we can see and hear from this debate is that the civility of it and and the general tenor of it is because both sides, both of our debaters are themselves products of liberal arts educations. In fact, excellent ones. And I think even Dr. Utel, who was arguing against liberal arts education, framed her position in the way that all good beneficiaries of a liberal arts education do, which is she questioned the definition of the terms. She gave a definition of liberal arts. She was really exploring all of the different facets of the question. And one of the things that we hear in some of the debates that you see on this question on television are not so civil. In fact, they're really very shrill. And that's because people don't actually take the time to really consider the questions that are being asked and the assumptions that underlie them. And yet we saw both sides do that tonight. And one of the most shrill aspects, I think, of a lot of the debates is that they tend to be very, very narrow in the scope of the question and think of cost and worth and value solely in economic terms. And what we saw and heard in Provost Wilhite's response is that on the one hand, he was willing to take very seriously those who have questions and concerns about the economic costs of an education, but he wasn't willing to stop there and also raise questions about the public worth, the public good, the overall value and meaning for us as persons, as citizens, as humans who have complex lives that develop over a long course of time, and so linked it also to questions of happiness and so on. So to just return to the economic issue, there is no question that higher education is expensive. The average debt, as Dr. Utel pointed out, is about $25,000 a year on average. But most people without a blink of an eye will spend that much at some point in their life for a car, right? And so if anything that Provost Wilhite is saying, it suggests that maybe, in fact, it is worth it. But the other thing that it's really important is that even when we're talking about this in economic terms, there are lots of assumptions that underline these discussions in terms of what we pick in terms of time frame. And well, let me just start with that. Provost Wilhite pointed out at the very end of his comments in the rebuttal that recent studies have in fact shown that in the long run, liberal arts grads actually outperform most other graduates with other kinds of professional degrees. In their peak earning years, they actually make more, on average $2,000 a year. So most of the economic arguments have tended to focus on starting salaries. But in fact, if we look at our lifetime of salaries, which is really what matters in the long run, we actually get a very different answer. So just by really raising this critical question, when you're hearing people talk about costs, when you hear them talking about salaries, you have to think about, well, what's the time frame that we're talking about? Are you talking about for my whole lifetime? Are you talking about my first 6 months out? Are you talking about my first 2 years out? Those questions really make a big difference in terms of how we understand the debate. There is no question that colleges and universities have to address escalating costs, and some of that has to do with the kind of work that we're seeing in the course that, or it's now been a couple of courses over several semesters, that Doctors Leckrone and Corbo are doing, where we're actually utilizing our own education to do things like form a PAC and to lobby and to actually get the government to think about how we allocate tax dollars, how we regulate loan providers, because increasingly part of the problem with the cost has been that more and more people, banks and institutions are lending money in predatory ways that used to be regulated, and requiring payback rates at much faster terms, not being willing to negotiate for people who are doing public service and so on. And yet when I was in college, those things were possible, and so I graduated with debt, but it was more negotiable. It was easier for me to pursue my passion and go on for a doctorate in philosophy. So we really have to address those things. I think it's also important to recognize that Provost Wilhite said that the biggest costs we have, biggest budget item is personnel, but actually the bigger budget item is financial aid. Right? $55 million annually is provided at Widener for financial aid to Widener students. So that's another way in which we have to question the terms. When people are throwing out statistics and saying the average cost, they are not accounting for financial aid dollars given. They're saying what the sticker price is, but actually, to continue to use the car analogy, just like most people don't pay the sticker price on a car window, most of us don't actually pay that price for a college education either. So even on economic terms, I think that the liberal arts education side has it. But if we broaden the scope of what we're talking about to also think about other important outcomes, that we don't think of college education as merely job training, but that particularly a liberal arts education prepares us for leadership, for meaningful lives, then I think the question starts to become more absurd when you say, is the cost worth it? It would be like saying, is it worth it for you to love your mother, right? I mean, it's not a kind of question that actually can be measured simply in dollars and cents. So Christopher B. Nelson actually just recently published a piece about these debates in the Wall Street Journal. And he argues that we really have to question the kind of assumption that we have about trying to quantify everything, right? We don't try to quantify whether it's worth it to love our mother, and maybe we shouldn't quantify something like the value of a liberal arts education. Because what first and foremost liberal arts education allows us is that we become independent thinkers, lifelong learners, capable of questioning the assumptions that underline debates in the same way that we saw both of our speakers do today. That said, I think that it's also important to recognize that a liberal arts education today has in fact changed with the times. So Dr. Utel's argument that, oh, that means we're just, sort of being nostalgic for some kind of Greek life, I think isn't quite true, because we really, if we think about the way in which we offer a liberal arts education at Widener, it is deeply rooted in civic engagement. It is deeply committed to engaged learning. It is deeply rooted in being able to have the opportunity to do complex problem solving inside the classroom and outside the classroom, and to work with students and with faculty from a range of different disciplines. That, to come back to the economic argument, is what employers want and need, but it's also what we want and need as persons. So Nelson actually argues that there are other ways that we could think about the value of an education in terms of merely thinking about it in purely economic terms. And he cites a Gallup-Purdue index report that comes from Great Jobs, Great Lives. And he says, really, there are 6 features we should be looking for in a liberal arts education. One is that we should hope that we have at least one teacher who we really find exciting during our study. Secondly, that we find a mentor when we're at college. Third, that we have experience of working on a long-term project that lasts about at least a semester, that really fully engages our attention and helps us develop research skills, critical thinking skills, teamwork skills, problem-solving skills. That we have the opportunity also, and now I can't read my own writing, to put what we learn in the classroom to the test outside the classroom. And that we also have a really rich extracurricular life and activities. And I think arguably Widener offers all of these things. So if that's a measure, we can see that that's something that we already do. I think we're working on doing it better. So I would argue that when you are thinking about the value of a liberal arts education, you should also think about where you're going to do it. And I do think that there are institutions that do offer, quite honestly, a better liberal arts education that is a better value economically, but a better value also in terms of offering all of the other kinds of benefits that Provost Wilhite offered. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Marr. So at this time, I just want to reflect on a comment that you made about civic engagement. And as Dean Marr mentioned, this is an ongoing project that Dr. LaCrone and I, Dr. Baskin, Dr. Sullivan and I have been working on for at least 2-3 semesters now at this point. Assistant Dean Householder has certainly been involved in every moment of this step, and that is to get all of you involved in civic engagement. So if you have learned something this evening by being here and learning how you can be your own advocate in terms of the cost of higher education, we'd like to give you a little slip of paper that we will send to your governors. So at this time, if you could help me out, do we have any Maryland residents in the audience? Okay, we have one. So Brittany, you're Maryland. And right down here, you could just raise your hand so Brittany can see you. Do we have any New York residents? You could raise your hands. Okay, we have one here, so New York. Any other New York? All right. New Jersey. All right. So Steve, you're in New Jersey? All right. And then the rest of you, Pennsylvania and Delaware, and if you're from another state outside of the ones we mentioned, you can take the last one, and Zach, that'll be yours. So raise your hands for New Jersey. Steve will make sure that you get one of the slips. Do you have that, Steve? And then rather than raising your hands, because I think we have a lot from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and from Delaware, Zach, why don't you just pass those out? If you did not get a slip from one of the other states, go ahead, take the slip that Zach is passing out. And before you leave, if you could just put those in the back next to the candy basket, help yourself to the candy, but we will appreciate that. And what we will do is send that to your governor or your governor-elect, so he or she can see that you've been here this evening. All right, now we're going to move to asking questions. And Dr. LaCrone, you're going to start us off with the first question.
Everybody's anxious to get home and start studying. So we'll have 2 last questions. We'll ask the respondents maybe to hold to about 2 minutes or so. And we'll direct one to Provost Wilhite and one to Professor Utel. We'll start off with Provost Wilhite. I think this is in response to one of your statements about politics. We once had presidents, legislators, governors, and other political leaders who argued for access to and investment in higher education. Will these types of leaders reemerge? And somewhat parenthetically, should we only elect liberal arts majors as political leaders?
Well, I think we have a good tradition of electing graduates of liberal arts education as presidents. And I would say whether or not we end up with presidents who are committed not just to increased access, which I believe our current president is and has demonstrated in a number of ways, but also one who is willing to form effective political coalitions to address the financing issue so that there is a greater investment of U.S. tax dollars in making sure that that access is available and that individuals are not saddled with unsupportable debt. But to do that, we have to work as leaders of higher education, as students, as those who believe that this is important for the common good, and we have to help mobilize the recognition of what the true cost of higher education is and how it is in our national interest to continue to build the education infrastructure in this country so that it is second to none in the world. We've occupied that position for many, many years, but that position is going to be increasingly challenged in your lifetime by other rising economies around the world. And for us to continue to be able to promote our democratic values internationally, we have to be sure that we have a higher education system and a basic education system that is second to none in the world, and that involves investment. That involves channeling the resources that we have in abundance in this country to support education at a much higher level than we currently do. I think we can elect such a president, but it's going to take the work of all of us who share that belief to make sure that happens.
Great, we have one more question and then we'll have concluding comments for this evening. So Professor Utel. And by the way, thank you for your questions. We selected two that were a little more polarized, so we're going to go with them. We appreciate all of your good questions. So, as a nursing major, I am taking sociology, psychology, English, and many more classes that really don't help me in my major. So, is it not safe to say that I will be a well-rounded individual?
Can I show you guys my shirt, actually? Yeah. My shirt says English major on it in Scrabble tiles. So that would be my actual stance on this question. Yes, you will become a well-rounded person. In all seriousness, though, we talk about well-rounded persons, and I always, and those of you who heard me speak in Professor Lecron's class will remember this very lame joke, where I just envision us rolling people down hills because they are so well-rounded. When we talk about well-roundedness, what do we actually mean? I would say that a person who is majoring in nursing, let's take, for example, the questioner, who also has the benefit of all of these other classes from all of these other disciplines, I would say that what you're getting is, frankly, precisely what Provost Wilhite is suggesting that you will get from combining your work in the field of nursing with some grounding in the liberal arts. And I would say especially for somebody who's really, by choosing that profession, committing yourself to working with your fellow human beings in terms of their well-being and their care. This seems to me to be a really deep commitment on your part, whoever you are, to really bettering the lives of the people around you. And how better to know the meaning of that work and the meaningfulness of that work from studying the liberal arts, from considering how the people that you interact with may have different perspectives from yours and being able to understand those perspectives, being able to manage and understand and empathize and respond to other people's stories, other people's personal histories, and sort of think about how that allows you to see them as a whole person so that you can truly care for them. And I would say honestly, and this is, this piece about from that Provost Wilhite was talking about how the liberal arts allow you to really define for yourself what it means to have a purposeful life, what it means to have a meaningful life. The liberal arts gives you the equipment and a vocabulary to do that not many other things do. And that enriches your work life no matter what you're doing. That allows you to work with other people in a meaningful way, both to see them as other human beings relative to yourself, but also to maybe think about what's meaningful to them, to help you engage with them in a deep way. And that is the common good. If we're thinking about what is the common good, you going out into the world with some understanding of what it means to be a human being, some appreciation for other people's stories and other people's lives and what's meaningful to other people, that's you contributing to the common good. And it seems to me that if we don't allow access to that opportunity for everybody, then we are seriously shortchanging our society and our communities and our ability to relate to other human beings and craft and construct meaningful relationships, both in our personal lives and in our work lives. So I would salute the nursing major who is hopefully enjoying all of those classes in the liberal arts, because I think that looking back, and again, going back to Dean Marr's point, you might not feel it now. You might not understand it necessarily right this minute. But think about it in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, when you've gotten that deep wealth of experience in your life. In what ways has your liberal arts education contributed to the lenses and the experiences and the frameworks that you now use to really have purpose?
Thank you to our panel up here.
I know, I couldn't keep it. I couldn't keep it going.
So we'd like to thank all of you for being here this evening. Students, we hope that you continue this discussion. You can continue this in your own courses. You can continue this in your service learning courses. And the service learning program at Widener has been a huge supporter of this work. You can continue it with undergraduate research and through many other outlets. If you're looking for ways to get involved, see Dean Householder and she will definitely connect you. We'd like to thank those who watched us from the comfort of their homes this evening. And that was certainly made possible through Widener TV. So we want to thank our Widener TV crew for being here this evening.